Bloody Elbow presents the MMA Vivisection, the show that gives you a comprehensive breakdown and expert analysis of all the fights happening on this weekend's UFC card. Here are your hosts, Zane Simon and Connor Rebush.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the MMA Vivisection with me, Zane Simon, and my co-host, as always, Connor Rebush. We are here once again talking about this week's UFC event going down at the Apex facility in Las Vegas, Nevada, headlined by a middleweight contenders-ish fight. I don't know. I mean, a middleweight fight between Uriah Hall and Sean Strickland. We're talking about the prelims for this card now, which is really indistinguishable from the main card in any meaningful way.
I mean, it's kind of worse.
It doesn't have Hall Strickland on top, but otherwise...
Or Kong Yaya, both of which I think are cool. Or even a fight like Bayes DePaula.
Yeah.
You know, it's not better, certainly.
No, it's not better, definitely. It's just very similar.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's just, this is a pretty losery card of, and you know, that's not to say anything about the fighters on it. I know people get mad. I know, you know, John Kavanagh gets mad whenever, and Dan Hooker in the past. Let's see who else has gotten really pissed off at me. Those two stand out in the past when I've ever dared to say, that a card,
to say that a card isn't good.
Yeah, when I've ever dared to say that a card sucks. I'm not actually hating on the fighters. It's just that the fighters are fine. It's just all about the kind of matchups that the UFC is putting them in.
Yeah. And
the fact that they're putting a whole bunch of people on one card that they don't express any interest in.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, sometimes you get cards. It just feels like a refuse. It's like a midden heap for the UFC's roster. They clearly don't care about these matchups.
Yeah. And it creates fights that are not interesting. Like
not compelling.
Not compelling fights. You know, if you don't care about these fights and you don't care about the way you match them up, if you're not trying to create or trying to craft a product that is enticing, then I'm not about to be enticed just for the hell of it, you know?
Yeah. We don't owe the matchmakers the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you got to bring something more to me in these cases than Wu Yanan taking on Nico Montano. Like, right. I don't care about a Wu Yanan fight, and Nico Montano at this point has, through circumstances both of her own creation and of the UFC's creation, really tanked any and all interests in her career right now.
Yeah. And again, you know, maybe you need to make that matchup. Maybe
sure.
Maybe it makes sense. Maybe it's the only matchup you can make. But you don't have to put it on the card
with a lot of other good fights.
You don't have to put it on the card with with all the other matchups that you don't like but had to make, you know? Spread them out.
Yeah.
Spread them out, damn it.
So if you're going to fill a whole card with stuff where it's like, yeah, I guess, then you're going to get a bad card. Anyway, that's my way of trying to avoid talking about Wu Yanan versus Nico Montano. So why don't we actually just talk about that fight?
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know, Zane. I'm curious about Montano's approach to this. I mean, curious in the way that it was curious for her to come out and instantly start grappling with Juliana Pena. You know, like...
Yeah, I mean, I think Montano is one of those fighters where on a very not striker-heavy season of The Ultimate Fighter that she was on, her boxing set her apart.
Yeah.
And it masks the fact that she's actually a fighter who works really hard to do everything, even when she's not necessarily good at everything.
Yeah. And she's not even that good of a boxer.
Yeah, exactly. Like, her boxing was good compared to Roxanne Modafferi's and Sahara Eubanks. But that's not a high bar to clear.
Right.
And then, people kind of forget, like, how much Montano tangled on the floor with some of these fighters and had fights be really sloppy and out of control for the success she otherwise had. And as she's gone on in her UFC career in very halting stops and starts, that has still continued to be an obvious problem, that she just is not she does not control the tempo of a fight or the positioning of it at all.
Right. Yeah. And that's the other problem, obviously, is that Montano has just performed very inconsistently. Look at her Tapology page, like the number of matchups she's had canceled in a row, even since that fight with Pena, which was itself a fight after a long layoff.
Yeah.
So she's just not gotten a chance to. I do still like I don't feel wrong for having thought, oh, this woman has some potential. She could improve. She's got a nicely well-rounded game.
She out-grappled Juliana Pena for a round.
Like, yeah.
There's some serious athletic upside there for her.
Yeah, and she's generally solid at the broad game she tries to play, but I think that's probably part of all these injuries and everything is probably part of the reason she doesn't seem to have progressed, or she doesn't have the experience to have become a smarter fighter.
Yeah.
Which I guess isn't really a factor here, because Wu Yanan is like, she only does one thing.
What is it?
Slugging.
Oh, I guess. Like,
right?
I guess if you had to distill her game to a thing,
yeah, right.
That might be, but it's like, it's like
it's not good.
Homeopathic slugging.
Just a drop of slug in a glass of water.
Drop of slug in a big glass of water, where like, sure. I guess if you have to distill what apart from water exists in this vial.
Yeah, she's a brawler in the worst sense, which is to say that she's just very, very aimless.
Yeah. And just not very good at fighting, and it distills down to having to just throw wild punches at somebody.
Yeah, pretty much. Like the opponent gets to set the pace, gets to decide when the exchanges happen, and then she's just going to respond to them. She's like a much downgraded version of like Casey. Why can't I think of the full name?
Cast Iron.
Yeah.
Casey.
Come on. What? We both know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
This card has broken our brain even when it comes to thinking of better fighters.
Courtney Casey.
Courtney Casey. There we go.
We're both thinking of it as her first name, and it was her last name.
Yeah. Wow. What an interesting discussion. It's like a watered down, not to lean on your joke, but it's like a watered down version of that, where she's just kind of, got cement feet, and
they got a toenail of Courtney Casey's, and they put it in water, shook it, distilled it, filtered it, put it in more water, distilled it again, and that's Wu Yanan.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take Nico Montano on the basis that I think she will come in here with a if a very broad approach, at least a more like aggressive approach I think she'll basically just take the initiative, which basically everyone who fights Wu Yanan gets to take the initiative. And aside from a surprise armbar against Lauren Muller, after letting Muller take the initiative and getting taken down, It just hasn't worked. She just has very even fights and doesn't have the power to turn that kind of dynamic into a winning situation.
It really does say something when you get like out-muscled by Mizuki Inoue up a division.
Right. Yeah, and it's not because Inoue, like, she was bigger than her. Inoue just like had
an athlete,
and she had like intent. Like, she just got to dictate all the exchanges.
Yeah.
So, yep. You don't want to let Montano dictate. At the very least, she will take over if you do that.
Yep. This would be a really miserable loss for Nico Montano if she loses this fight.
Yes.
Like, Julia Avila, Juliana Pena, even Pam Sorensen are all very reasonable losses for a fighter to take and build off of.
Yeah.
Wu Yanan is very much you really can't compete at this level at all if you're not going to win this fight.
Yep.
All right. Odds on the bout. Wu Yanan opened at plus 190, dropped down to plus 155, and was hanging pretty even at plus 150 range for a couple of weeks until she jumped up from plus 151 to plus 192 in the past couple days. So a lot of money coming in on Montano recently. Montano opened at minus 225, jumped up to minus 180, and then dropped from minus 182 to minus 241 in the last couple days. That brings us to a featherweight bout. Melsik Bagdasaryan against Colin Anglin. And this is one of those, we were talking a bit on our main card, Vivi, that you'll hear dropping shortly. There are a couple of fights on this card where it really just feels like the fight is going to be dictated by which of these young, inexperienced kids with some decent technical skill actually has the cardio to fight for 3 rounds. Because, like, I mean, in part, I would just say Melsik Bagdasaryan is a much better striker than Colin Anglin. He has a real power, has a very who's the, damn it, now my whole brain really is broken by this card. Who's the guy who just beat Cub Swanson?
Hold on.
There we go.
Oh, okay, good. I was going to keep making that noise until I thought of it, so thank goodness.
Thank God. Yeah. A Giga Chikadze vibe. Like, you know, he's clearly had some very good kickboxing training. And he's also very clearly treating MMA like he can just go out there and throw kill shots at people and they will go away.
Yeah.
And when they didn't on the Contender Series, he ran out of ideas. And he ended up having this slog of a fight with Denis Buzuka just because he couldn't knock him out in the first round.
Yep.
And I can easily see that happening with Colin Anglin as well. It's just that Anglin is a much less distinctive fighter in any vein. He doesn't have a go-to wrestling game. He doesn't have a go-to grappling game. He likes to strike a lot, but he's not setting himself apart as any kind of ferocious striking talent.
Yeah.
And at that point, like, I know Bagdasaryan is a very sharp, powerful striker. So I'm going to take Bagdasaryan, but if he goes out and can't knock Anglin out, you're going to get a very messy fight.
Yeah, it just seems like the kind of matchup where Bagdasaryan could win a tepid round with the one shot, even if it's not a kill shot.
Yeah.
With like the most meaningful strike of the round.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Giga Chikadze win multiple fights in the UFC now.
Yeah.
where he's gotten better lately, and he's gotten sharper lately, where he would just go out and he would do two really cool things in the first two rounds and win those, and then be exhausted in round three and still have enough to win the fight.
Yep. And at the very least, like Chikadze himself, and I think that is a strong comparison, Bagdasaryan has shown enough knowledge and wherewithal on the ground to, because obviously, like, you go in there against Kickboxer Man, you take him down if you're like an MMA guy. And Bazooka tried that, failed on the vast majority of his takedowns, and ended up getting reversed and actually lost out in terms of top position time on the ground. So, yeah, I'll take Bagdasaryan too. I think there's a strong chance it might be. I don't have a super good read on how tough Anglin is, but he certainly hasn't been knocked out yet.
Yeah.
So if he can survive, then we might just be in for kind of a... Again, we're seeing consistency as the downside of consistency all over this card.
Yeah.
And this could be one of those two. Same round over and over where Bagdasaryan just lands the most impactful strike.
Well, like I say, I can easily see it being like the Bazooka fight where Bagdasaryan lands the big shots for 2 rounds and wins it. Yeah. But then by the end of the bout in the round 3, he's just clinging on, and everybody's kind of like, that wasn't that impressive. Bagdasaryan was one of the hot prospects on that season of the Contender Series. Yeah. And he didn't actually get a contract off of that fight. The UFC gave him a development deal that was then meaningless because COVID hit. Or no, they promised him a fight on the next season of the Contender Series, which he couldn't make happen. And eventually they just decided to sign him anyway. Yep. But it was a fight where by the end of it, you're like, yeah, wow, you're still really raw and could use more time. Mm-hmm. And this could easily just be another one of those kinds of fights where it's like, yep, you're definitely a great athlete with one very good skill set that you're working on, and that's enough to get the win. But between the two of them, both pretty inexperienced fighters, it is Bagdasaryan who has the one really good skill set. Yep. That's really it. Bagdasaryan's the favorite, opened at plus 140, dropped to minus 150, is currently minus 144. Colin Anglin opened at minus 160, jumped up to plus 130, is currently at plus 117. That seems fine by me. Two young, inexperienced fighters where, definitely Bagdasaryan's the favorite, but you don't want to start dumping odds way in his favor at this stage of his career. No. Not at all. He is definitely still at a point where even just a guy could hand him his big prospect loss. Yeah. That brings us to a lightweight bout. Chris Gritzmacher, Rafa Garcia. Wow, good guess. I had to look it up to see if he was a Spanish speaker or Brazilian. I was this close to saying Rafa. I liked what I saw from Rafa Garcia in that that Haqparast fight. He definitely got tuned up. I thought he actually sort of the success he did have early sort of drew one of Haqparast's best yet performances out of him. Yeah, I think it's Garcia. It seems like he really got exactly the kind of experience that you want to see somebody get out of a regional career. Mm-hmm. Which is he spent a whole bunch of time fighting in Combate, and he's put together an actually pretty polished game fighting decent, good level competition where, he suddenly jumps up and fights Nasrat Haqparast, and it's like, oh, wow, here's an actual good athlete who can really punish you for the mistakes in your game, but you're not coming in looking like you aren't prepared. It's just... Yeah. It wasn't until the end of that fight that it started to look really, really one-sided. Yeah. And that was largely because Haqparast worked his body the hell over. Yep. But up to that point, he was pretty stable. I was very impressed by... there are downsides to the kind of defense that Garcia uses on the feet, which is
just sort of shelling up and hunching over.
Yeah.
But the plus side is he didn't get backed off by Haqparast like at all. He just stands his ground to defend and then continues coming forward. And again, forced Haqparast to show a lot of footwork and a lot of variety in his striking that he is normally not called upon to show.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's a better athlete than Chris Gritsmacher, as is basically everyone Gritsmacher fights. I think that kind of defense is going to be just fine against the sort of one-note boxing that Gritsmacher brings to the table. And the tendency to stand his ground and then pursue does not allow Gritsmacher to do the thing he's best at, which is pressuring. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take Rafa Garcia.
Yeah, no, I don't have a lot to add to that, really. For Gritsmacher, it's one of those fights where I can see him winning this fight, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
He's working hard to be. He's working very hard to be Brian Barberena.
Yeah,
but he does not even have Brian Barberena's level of athleticism.
No, I mean on the one hand, he's just much smaller.
Yeah, but he's been working hard to become a more technical infighter, somebody who takes all the damage but is able to slip and counter shots, is getting better hands, things like that. He's really working hard on it.
Yeah.
It's just also hard. It's hard not to look at that fight against Alexander Hernandez and, have people talking and going into that fight that were teammates of his and stuff like that, being like, oh no, you don't know how much he's improved and stuff like that. And just have like the athletic gulf just open before him to a degree that, people have to understand that there is more than just working hard to winning.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just never going to be better.
And he's not that technically proficient, like for a guy who really needs to have a technical edge because he has zero physical edges.
Yeah.
Like I guess maybe durability, but even that wasn't enough to stand up to what Hernandez put out. So
yeah. So, Garcia's only 5'7". So he's also, he's probably a guy who could go down to featherweight if he really wanted to, although he's pretty bricked up at lightweight.
Yep.
But it's really hard to pick Gritsmacher to win any fights in the UFC. Like that one he won over Joe Lozon was really kind of indictment of where Lozon's at this point in his career. And Garcia, like I say, we've both said he's put together a really good, like consistent, well-formed, patient style out of his regional success that seems like it'll carry over pretty well into the UFC. It may not, he may never himself be the kind of athlete or the kind of technician to really rise up the lightweight division, just because the lightweight division is impossibly deep. But I'm not going to look at his loss to Haqparast as like a real knockback on a potential progressive path forward, especially because despite looking like he's 40, he's only 26.
Yeah. Oh, he's supposed to lose that fight.
Yeah,
that's fine. If he won it, it would have been a huge surprise and also quite possibly the worst thing that could have happened to him. He would have very much become a victim of his own success with UFC matchmaking. Nothing about that was surprising or disappointing from or shouldn't have been disappointing from Garcia's perspective, though I'm sure he was disappointed.
Yeah. So, it's just one of those things where Garcia's going to be physical and tough and persistent with his pressure and persistent with his punching. It's hard to, Gritsmacher is going to have to fight his perfect fight to win. And I'm not going to bank on that.
Oh, he didn't even fight a perfect fight really against aging Joe Lozon.
Yeah.
I don't know that he has a perfect fight in him.
Yeah. It's a tough path for the Gritsmachers of the world.
Yep.
Odds on the bout. Gritzmacher is the underdog, opened at plus 150 and has been trending steadily upward to plus 233. Garcia opened at minus 175, dropped down to minus 225, and is currently down at minus 294. That brings us to a featherweight bout and one of the better prelims on this card, if not the best prelim on this card, potentially. Danny Chavez, Kai Kamaka III.
Yeah, and shockingly, one of the many fights on this already weak card that got reconfigured and didn't really get worse.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be Chavez versus Duha Choi.
Yep.
Which certainly would have been a violent action fight. But this is almost like a more interesting bout because it seems like we're going to get several rounds of action.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is a fight dictated really on kind of by the fact that Chavez and Kamaka are both pretty difficult strikers to handle that I feel like get in their own way a lot. In that, they both have like Kamaka has a really sneaky wrestling game that he can fall back on at times. And he's a good puncher inside and a good combination puncher. Chavez is a fearsome kicker and incredibly fast. But neither guy seems to have a good sense of what they want their tempo to be in a fight.
Yeah.
Of what they're building towards. Like, it really says something for Chavez that Jared Gordon could just pressure him and win most of the kickboxing exchanges with pressure.
Yeah. Granted, a much more technically refined Jared Gordon than we had seen up to that point. Sure.
But Danny Chavez, like, kickboxing is his thing. Being a striker is his thing. And he's way faster than Jared Gordon.
Exactly. Yeah, he's used to being faster than people. He was faster than Gordon, but just a simply good game plan and a consistent attack took him completely out of it. The man is way too comfortable backing into the fence.
Yeah, he's way too comfortable backing into the fence. I believe he's a longtime MMA Masters talent.
That is the vibe. It really, really feels like a fighter out of that camp.
Yeah, and just the willingness to be on the back foot, the willingness to get taken down and create a scramble off of a takedown rather than trying not to get taken down.
Yeah.
And the inability to set a pace, to just be like the guy who's going to lead and push the pace and take an advantage when he gets it and turn it into prolonged offense is always a problem with Chavez. And for Kamaka, there's also a sense here for a guy who does his best work getting into the pocket and punching and, chaining some punches into some takedowns and top control, that he's always willing to back off and reset and to cede the pace that he's setting to his opponent and give them a chance to do their own work.
Yeah.
Like, losing that fight to TJ Brown, it feels like a loss that never should have happened, because TJ Brown is a guy who will absolutely let you dictate the fight to him.
Yeah.
But Brown came out and set a fast pace, and Kai Kamaka just let it happen.
The real tactical issue for Kamaka in that fight was trying to counter, like you said. Like it seemed that he could have just kept the pressure on and really held on to the initiative, but he kept resetting and waiting for Brown to walk himself into trouble.
Yeah.
Rather than putting the trouble on Brown that he was able to whenever he tried. Whenever he just stepped forward and threw a combination, it was effective. It was when he would pull back and cede the initiative, that as that fight went on, Brown realized this guy keeps trying to counter the first thing I do, so I'm just going to fake the first thing and then make him pay.
Yeah.
And he did that over and over and over. I still think Kamaka probably deserved the decision in that fight.
But it's indicative of the problem, of a problem that is going to make this fight really difficult.
Yeah.
You know?
Because absolutely. You should just put the pressure on Chavez, even if it's not your thing. I know it is Jared Gordon's thing.
Yeah.
But Kamaka can absolutely do it. More so than Jared Gordon, he's fast, powerful. He's a good body puncher. Like he has a lot of the right elements to keep that fight on Chavez. And I agree. It is the fact that he does not keep an aggressive approach that will absolutely allow Chavez moments in this fight where his own speed and his diversity of attack too. That Chavez is a really great low kicker.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, the MMA Masters thing, I think I've remembered this 3 times talking about him, but he is so much like Ricardo Lamas without the wrestling background.
Yeah.
That really, really adds up.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. So I don't know who to pick here. It seems like a really even dynamic that.
Yeah. Both guys are going to give control to their opponent and let them, despite being dangerous strikers going forward and leading the dance.
Yeah.
They are both going to give control to their opponent in ways that will allow their opponent perfect opportunities to take over the momentum.
Yeah.
So I think I am going to pick Chavez.
Yeah.
Just because I think that I really do think that Kamaka is even that much more his own worst enemy.
At least Chavez is insanely confident.
Yeah, and he's got this blinding speed that he can rely on, and he's really durable and tough. And I think for Kamaka, part of the problem for him is that when he goes forward, he does tend to get hit and get hurt.
Yeah.
And it makes him want to build those resets into his game.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem I'm having is that I also think that Kamaka is arguably, and this is, again, both these guys do seem really stuck in their ways. He's arguably the better adjuster because I think he's more coachable.
Yeah, I mean, he reminds me in a lot of ways, not to just go all Hawaiian, comparing Hawaiian fighters to Hawaiian fighters, but Maki Pitolo.
Yeah, I can see that.
Where it's just oh man, you do a lot of things really well, and you watch the course of a fight and you see his fight with who was the other guy that got really mad at me? That's how I have to remember half the fighters now.
Tony Kelly?
No. Maki Pitolo.
Oh. I don't know.
Cuban Missile Crisis.
Hector Lombard?
No, Julian Marquez.
Oh, I forgot his nickname was I just think of him as the Miley Cyrus guy now.
Yeah. Miley Cyrus guy. It was
I forgot about that. He yelled at you on Twitter. I remember that now.
Yeah.
That was good.
But yeah, Pitolo in that fight, he had Julian Marquez dead to rights several times. He had that fight very controlled. He's doing all the right things, but there's just a sense Marquez was the guy who was there to keep coming and keep trying to push the fight. And when Pitolo got hurt or had something go wrong, the confidence would drain straight out of him.
Yeah.
And I think for Kamaka, that's kind of part of the problem too, is just you can do all this stuff, but he goes forward and he gets clipped a bit by TJ Brown. He's man, I shouldn't do that again.
Yeah, I think that's actually probably connected to the coachability that I get from him. That in that Brown fight, there were several sort of waves where he would make the right adjustment. I think even in the third round of that fight, His corner was like, look, you got to go first. You got to put combinations together. He did it a bit. And then, but it's his pathology always comes back, right?
Mm-hmm.
He goes back. He's like, okay, now I need to reset. And then Brown gets to take the fight back over. Chavez is almost less coachable because he's so confident, but he's impossible to cow, even against Jared Gordon when he was getting tuned up just in totally the wrong positions. He was still going for it in the third round.
Yep.
So, or did that fight make it to the third round? It did, didn't it?
Yeah, I believe it was a decision.
Yeah, I thought so. I remember him getting hurt quite a bit, but he's very tough. Yeah, I'm gonna take Chavez too. I don't love it, man. He's too formless, and Kamaka. There's so much more about Kamaka's process that just looks like better mechanics.
Yeah,
nicer looking combinations.
Yep.
Chavez just kind of gets by on like speed and willingness, but that confidence matters.
Yeah, I mean, there's really a kind of a sense out of MMA masters that they like teach all the wrong things the right way.
Sure.
You know, where it's just like a lot of the fighters that are come out of that camp, you just like, there are massive technical flaws in your game or massive stylistic flaws in your game.
Yep.
But all these dudes are like super tough and super dedicated to the fight.
Yeah, you get the sense it's a gym with a lot of good sparring or something. Like,
yeah, a lot of hard sparring, not a lot of coaching.
Sure.
You know, that's the feeling you get out of it. And Kamaka, on the other hand, looks like a guy who gets a lot of good coaching, but does not like getting into a really difficult fight. Which
is ironic because his tendency to back off often makes the fight really difficult.
Yeah.
It should be fun, man. I think it's going to be very back and forth. Two fighters who like to counter and exchange and put their strikes together well, I think, and I just don't think anyone's going to wrest control of it. So it'll be a good, entertaining simmer.
Yep. Chavez opened at -110, jumped up to +125. Is currently -102. Kamaka opened at -110, jumped to -152. Is currently -121. So very, very narrow favorite for Kai Kamaka. And that brings us to a women's strawweight bout. Jinh Frey, Ashley Yoder, and just kind of a benchmark fight for Frey, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as long as Frey isn't controlling Yoder on the ground, she's going to probably be losing, but not by a super wide margin.
You think Frey will be losing to Yoder?
I think there's a strong potential in any matchup on the feet for Frey to get outstruck by volume alone.
Yeah, but Yoder is like not able to keep volume with anybody.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, she got outstruck by Miranda Granger 26-33 in a fight that she won.
Yeah. You know, Granger is like insistent on a pace. Frey is Tyron Woodley, Zane.
I know, but she's not actually as bad. She's
Tyron Woodley who doesn't put her back to the fence, but she's super low output.
She is
super low output. Problem for
Yoder is also super low. You're right, though. I mean, I was saying like Yoder's output is 2.75 strikes landed per minute, but then I went over and looked at Frey, and it's 1.79.
Terrible. Yeah, I mean, I think a bigger problem for Yoder than her volume, which I agree is not tremendous, but is not as bad as Frey's, is that she is going to stumble into a fight that she can't win.
Yeah.
That's the real big pitfall, is that she's going to like crash into Frey and basically demand that she be taken down by a much more physically imposing fighter. I think Frey can basically accidentally win this fight. She has no qualms about just holding someone down. If when they do get into exchanges, even if she's getting outstruck, she may just win a round by being more powerful. She can crack a little bit. So I'll take Jinyu Fry. Seems like a fight more or less designed for her to win, whether she wants to or not.
Yeah, it is worth noting that at this point, Yoder's success in the UFC has come not come against anyone that either has any kind of technical or any kind of physical edge over her.
Yeah.
Like Amanda Cooper, Siri Kondo, and Miranda Granger are all fighters who possess neither a major physical or skill advantage nor physical advantage over Ashley Yoder.
Yep.
And a list like Justine Kish, Angela Hill, Mackenzie Dern, Randa Marcos, Livia Hanada Souza are all fighters who either have one thing they do better than Ashley Yoder or, in the case of somebody like Justine Kish, just a physical advantage.
Yep.
And Randa Marcos.
And that's Jinyu Fry here. She's the Justine Kish in this. She's a low output Justine Kish.
Yep. So yeah, I guess I'll pick. I was going to pick Fry from the outset as well, but yeah, I mean, it is one of those fights where it's just like, yeah, you might lose to Ashley Yoder, but if you do, I mean,
yep, a huge indictment.
Man, that's not good.
Yep. Expert analysis here. That is not good.
Not good. No bueno. No bueno. Jinyu Fry.
What a card, Zane.
I know. Yoder opened at minus 140 and is still at minus 140. My God.
Well, no one's betting on this?
No.
What?
Fry opened at plus 120 and is currently at plus 115. Man, getting underdog odds to Ashley Yoder. This is the first time that Yoder has been favored consistently in a fight.
But why?
I don't know. Since Kondo and Cooper.
But why?
And I don't know.
Explain it.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's just simply because no one wants to bet. I mean, if people place your bets, if ever there was a fight where it desperately needs your financial investment to be interesting, this is it. You are gonna need to have something on the line to even watch this one, so do it.
Yeah.
Or don't watch it. It's also an option, a cheaper and more enjoyable option.
I mean, it definitely. My biggest caution here against Yoder would be, again, her fight against Levine Souza, who also has a lower strikes per minute output than Yoder at 2.06.
Yeah.
And really just honestly outboxed Yoder.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, at least Souza's low strike output is easier to explain as component of her heavy preference for grappling.
Yeah.
She doesn't tend to spend a ton of time on the feet just doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it's true.
Which is more Fry's bent.
But no. I'm surprised that Ashley Yoder would be favored in this fight.
I don't know.
Well, I also would not bet on Jinyu Fry, so there you go. That brings us to a bantamweight bout: Ronnie Lawrence, Trevin Jones, and this is actually kind of a hard fight to call.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly, because Trevin Jones has proven in the UFC now that he is actually kind of a problem. He's very experienced. He's decently capable everywhere. He's hard to throw off of his game. And he's powerful. He's also a very low output counterpuncher.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, even against Mario Batista, not just against Timur Valiev, he was not dominating that Batista fight in any significant way before getting that huge uppercut knockout. He's very much a fighter that will let their opponent push the pace on him, but has found ways, has shown that he can just pull out big wins doing that. On the other side, you've got in Ronnie Lawrence, a fighter who is much, much less experienced, not a deep technical striker at all, puts himself in some bad position standing, but largely tries to stay away from people with kicks, but absolutely pushes a very hard pace on opponents and looks to break them with pace. Which makes this a hard fight to call. Because, you really do get a fight that is made in Lawrence's case to let him dominate the pace of the fight, and a fight in Jones' case that is made for him to be able to just maybe land one or two huge shots on somebody who is not as good a striker as they probably will end up needing to be to fight at this level long term.
Yeah, I mean, you have the opportunity for counter punches and counter takedowns for Jones with Lawrence's kick heavy attack, but also like a passivity that is going to invite and make those strikes very effective.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to pick Ronnie Lawrence here. To date, he's shown himself to be very tough.
Yep.
And his only loss came to Steve Garcia, who likes to push a similar pace to Lawrence.
Yeah.
And could really, make that fight, take the kind of fight Lawrence likes to win. And that was in 2016 too, after which Lawrence took 3 years off from fighting. But it is like, it's a big step up from Vince Cachero to Trevin Jones, who is just a legit, he's 30. He's been fighting consistently for 10 years now and didn't have any of the respect. Has taken a bunch of losses over that time, but is clearly now got to the UFC at a perfect point where everything's coalescing for him. Where he's at his most comfortable, most technical, most crafty veteran point, where he can play a game that is high risk, high reward, and come out with big wins for it. But I think that Ronnie Lawrence is going to he's going to be the guy to show the flaws in Jones' style that have allowed him to take several, 3 split decision wins over his career to guys that he's probably honestly just better than overall.
Yep. I'm with you. I don't have a lot to add. For me, I think Lawrence is, again, as you said, durability. That makes me confident in picking him because otherwise it does seem like, in a somewhat similar way to the main event, a kind of matchup dynamic where Lawrence is going to be dictating most of the time.
Yep.
And as long as he can tank the shots that Jones does put out, he's probably good.
Yeah, and if he can't, he'll get knocked out, and it'll be a tough loss for Lawrence to learn that somebody at some point is going to do this to him. Like, he's going to fight, a Merab Dvalishvili at some point.
Yeah.
Who is just absolutely capable of shutting down his wrestling game all the way through and landing way bigger shots standing. And he's going to run into that in the UFC eventually.
Yeah. Although I don't know if Dvalishvili is the guy to knock him out either. That man does not.
Well, he might not knock him out, but he might tune him up the whole fight.
Yeah.
Yep. But so Lawrence is there's gonna be somebody who's gonna really make him pay for not having a well-developed striking game at all. But Trevin Jones just seems like too passive. This is just just the right tipping point for Lawrence to go out and get another ugly, gritty, put a pace on somebody win.
Mm-hmm.
And for Jones, it'll show why people weren't that, he came into the UFC as a real dark horse and like was on nobody's radar before getting that Valiev win.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be a fight like this, if he takes this loss, would be why.
Mm-hmm. I still like Trevin Jones. He's just got such a weird style and surprising potency.
Yeah, I mean it's the thing that's valuable about it. There are no silver linings to come out of COVID, but one of the things it did is it made the UFC take a lot of chances on a lot of veteran fighters who were just ready to go at the right time. And it gave opportunities to some guys who would not have gotten to the UFC based off their record.
Yeah, like how cool was it to see Malcolm Gordon beat Francisco Figueiredo? He's one of those guys too.
Yeah, where it's just like these people have put in a ton of work and have become good fighters in ways that don't tend to get them to the UFC or get them consistent UFC careers.
Yep.
But the UFC needed people. And so they went out and they picked guys like Trevin Jones up. They went out and they got, oh, damn it. Who was it that just lost a controversial fight to, oh, damn it.
I don't know. Another guy who's on the list, by the way, who fought,
Daniel Pineda was who I was thinking of.
Oh, yeah. Another guy who's like an experienced wild man who fought Philip Rowe, who we'll be talking about in a moment, Gabe Green.
Yeah.
I don't know if that guy would have got signed, but he is awesome. I'm very glad he's in the UFC.
We are getting, we're getting some guys that are actually ready to, consider. They're really, when you've got a roster where you're bumping guys like Chase Hooper as future prospects,
right?
Hiring a guy like Daniel Pineda and then putting him into some fights like that, or somebody like Kron Gracie. You went out and you got Kron Gracie.
Yeah.
Putting some of these guys into fights like that, where suddenly you have these veterans who've been working for years. You get some good, fun results out of that.
Yeah, and who doesn't love a good? I mean, well, probably lots of people, but you and I both love a janky but functional game, which is what these fighters bring in.
Yep. So yeah, Jones Lawrence. It'll be an interesting test fight for both guys. For Lawrence, it's somebody who is really, honestly dangerous and crafty enough to land big shots on him. And for Jones, it's, the kind of fight that he may have failed at in the past, which is somebody who can just go out and put a ton of pressure and offense and grind on him and make him pay for sitting back and trying to let opponents come to him and give him counter shot opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Odds on the bout, Lawrence is the favorite, opened at -180, dropped to -230, jumped all the way back up to -151, and is currently -157. Jones opened at +155, jumped up to +195, and has dropped steadily all the way back down to +129 right now. And that brings us to our opening bout of the card. Philip Rowe, Ryan Kosey, and this is very much a Melsik Bagdasaryan, Colin Anglin fight again.
Mm-hmm. Man, can I just say before we talk about it even, Orion Kosey, like that is the prototypical unheralded team alpha male fighter name. You know what I mean? Like this is now we're in an era where the annoying white kids who did sort of okay at high school wrestling are named shit like Orion.
It's true.
I guess it is a next generation Uriah Faber sort of moniker.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Chad
mean,
Mendez, next gen Chad Mendez.
yeah, but Chad is like a 2 on the nose kind of name, you know.
Yeah.
Orion is like, well, we don't actually think our son is like a dumb jock. He's got a name like Orion. These are California jocks.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just thinking of a Team Alpha Male fighter whose name is like Moonbeam or something.
Yes. Orion Kosey is just a guy.
Yeah.
That's I think that's what you were getting at with that comparison to the Bogdasarian fight.
Yeah, where you've got in Rowe, you've got a guy who actually has like some pretty obvious. Mostly, he's leaning on his physical size because he's 6'3".
He's like huge. Yeah. He's going to have like a 10-inch reach advantage or something like that over Kosey.
Yeah. You've got a guy who's got a very obvious part of his game that he's trying to lean on against a guy who is just a dude, and whether or not Philip Rowe gets really tired is kind of the whole story of this fight.
Yeah, pretty much. And I don't think Kosey puts enough pressure on to make that result. He does seem to ramp up as the fight goes on.
Yeah.
He's not actually that bad a counterpuncher. He's got a sort of clubbing, really clubbing like right hook instead of a straight right hand, but it's kind of tricky. But until he gets to the point where he's like letting that shot go and following it up, he's really one and done. He's a pretty low output pressure fighter when he is a pressure fighter. And he is like, nominally an effective wrestler. All Team Alpha Male fighters are, but doesn't really push that advantage. And he's let me put it this way, in a matchup where he really needs to pressure and put the fight on Philip Rowe, he's not Gabe Green.
Yeah.
He does not push that kind of pace. He certainly doesn't have, he may have something approaching Gabe Green's durability. I don't know. That man is insanely durable. And actually, he almost certainly doesn't because he's been knocked out before. That's Rowe's record. Has Kosey been knocked out at his 7
Kosey's
fight
never lost.
Right. He does seem to be pretty durable. He's one of those guys whose counterpunching shows up when he gets hit and just swings back. But he doesn't have the defense that makes Gabe Green's style of insane swarming pressure really work. Which is his ability to slip and roll under something and then come with a flurry after that defensive move. And again, Rowe is actually like a pretty capable wrestler himself. Yeah. He's I think, again, maybe just because he's so huge, but this is a guy who, if you let him get a body lock on you, he will fling you around. And he will win positions just by being able to get like long limbs around his opponent. And also seems to have a knack for transitional grappling, whether that means escaping or finding a submission at some point. Doesn't seem super likely, but he's pretty difficult to control. So I don't see what Kosey really does to win more than a round unless he can get like sustained top position. He's otherwise going to be fighting at a huge reach disadvantage and not putting up enough volume to overcome that. Yeah, that's kind of my feeling. I mean, Gabe Green was getting beat pretty handily for the first round of that fight, and it was really just his insane insistence on pressure and keeping on Rowe that broke him down. And for Kosey, his fight against Matt Dixon was his first fight of his whole career where he wasn't can crushing. Right. So, it's not. And he looked okay. Alpha male fighters are well conditioned. They have great training partners. Yeah. He looks pretty solid, but just in the way that guys fighting look solid. Yeah. So it's one of those things where I just don't think I think in this case, much like the Bogdasarian Anglin fight above, I just don't think that Kosey has enough of any one thing to offer to
make Rowe as exhausted as Gabe Green did.
Yep.
And if he might, Bagdasarian and Rowe, they're not locks. Like, they're just the guys that you look at in these fights and you're like, oh yeah, no, you have there's an obvious part to your game that is going to be better than most people that you fight.
Yeah, they are the prospects in these matchups. Yeah. They have strong potential. Something in their game really declares itself. And even I'll say, even after getting tired against Green, Rowe still found some success. Like, yeah, he didn't fold the way you might be worried a giant who's used to intimidating his opponents who suddenly starts getting bullied would. Yeah, he collected himself a few times, found some nice counters. Green started to get tired from his own pace, and Rowe didn't break.
Yeah. Kosi is the favorite in this match. Opened at minus 185, dropped down to minus 201, is currently up at minus 162. So late money coming in on Rowe. Rowe opened at plus 160.
Said, love that Contender Series bump. Oh, wait, no. Yep. Rowe was on the Contender Series too. I guess he's just lost.
No, it's the guy with one loss to his record now and the guy who's never lost.
Yeah.
But, Orion Kosi, before he fought on the Contender Series, his most experienced opponent was 18-43.
Yep.
So.
Not that Rowe was like fighting stacked competition either, but.
No, but.
Kosi was really can crushing.
Yeah, Kosi was definitely. They both were. I mean, Rowe's his fight on the Contender Series was Leon Shabazian. That was a huge step from anybody he'd beaten before too.
Yep.
It's just Rowe comes out of it looking like a guy who there's something he can do that can really work for him in fights, and Kosi looks like a guy who's been just way more physical than his opponents.
In a matchup where, even his Contender Series fight was like his first physical parity fight.
Yeah.
This one, a guy who's used to having a physical advantage is going to be fighting at probably a physical disadvantage for the first time ever.
Yep. Rowe opened at plus 160 and was trailing along pretty even at that number, and has dropped dramatically in the past few days down to plus 135. So those odds really tightening up. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. Give us a like, subscribe to our podcasts. Bloody Elbow Presents on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all that good stuff. Stay tuned for the main card bivvy dropping shortly over on all our channels. And as always, the MMA Vivisection is brought to you by Combat Wombat, makers of fine art prints featuring famous fights and fighters. That's all the work of Chris Rini. You can find his stuff over at chrisrini.com, CHRISRINI.com. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this Bloody Elbow Presents production. To check out more of our content, hop over to the Bloody Elbow Presents SoundCloud and iTunes pages, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is also titled Bloody Elbow Presents. We're also on Apple TV, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, Overcast, Player FM, and Amazon Music. Just search for Bloody Elbow Presents and you'll get brand new shows throughout the week, including Care Don't Care, The Mookie and Crookie Show, the Best of the Come On Now MMA podcast, Crooklyn's Corner, the MMA Vivisection, the Level Change podcast, Show Money, the 6th Round Post-Fight Show, 6th Round Retro, the MMA Depressed Us, and radio-style play-by-play for every UFC pay-per-view. You can also follow us on Twitter at Bloody Elbow and on Facebook at facebook.com/BloodyElbowBlog, and of course on BloodyElbow.com.